We have the chance, with a relatively small number of people, to use the element of surprise to affect what happens in the political process. Because just as they don't expect the Spanish Inquisition, they don't expect a well-organized group of seculars showing up in numbers in 2015. And we're going to have that calendar ready. And we're going to say, Oregon secularists, organize, be ready. You've got your week. And you do your service. Instead of a 2-year Peace Corps service in West Africa, do 1 week of service in Iowa to change the history of the United States. That's what we're going to get done. And we're going to get it done together. Most of what I know about the Bible comes from I got a present when I was 10 or 11 years old, that children's Bible with the faux leather cover and the little purple lettering. That was really about all the knowledge I had in the Bible. And I remember I was about 12 and I was, fighting with my sister on summer vacation in the back seat of the car. She was on my side of the seat, that sort of thing. But I said, all right, we're in Utah. It looks biblical. I'll read the children's Bible, see what I can learn. And I'm flipping through, learning from the Bible, when I get to the part where God instructs Abraham to kill his son. And I learned from the Bible that this is positive. It shows that he's a God-fearing man. And I'm thinking, geez, I'm looking up at my dad in the driver's seat, hoping he's not too God-fearing, because this doesn't look too great from my perspective. And many of you may have had this moment, but it was my first moment where I thought this book that's so highly regarded maybe has some legitimate questions that might be raised regarding its application to our life. Now, I think that story is a story we should all know. It's part of our culture. It's part of our heritage. We should be aware of this story, as we should be aware of many stories from the past. But I want to tell you a true story from the 21st century in the United States of America. It's the story of a little girl, about 3 or 4 years old, named Amia White. And like most children in the 21st century in America at that age, Amia White went to childcare. And sadly, they lost track of little Amia White at her childcare. And she was left alone in a van in the sun in Alabama for several hours. And little Amia White died alone in that van. Now, accidents can happen all of the time, but I want you to understand that little Amia White attended a religious childcare in the state of Alabama. And I want you to understand the laws in the state of Alabama. I want you to picture 2 childcares side by side, one secular, one religious. The secular childcare must obey medication safety regulations, food segregation regulations, child staff ratios, proper training for the child care providers, all the health and safety laws that apply to the secular child cares in the state of Alabama. The religious child care is exempt. And indeed, it's very difficult to even find out what is happening with regard to the safety of these most vulnerable little citizens, because the state doesn't even inspect these religious child cares. In fact, there was a shyster who was running a so-called secular child care in the state of Alabama. And they cited him for safety violations with regard to transportation. And so you know what he chose to do? He simply said, well, I will file as a religious childcare. You cannot discriminate based on a religion, whether it is the biggest religion, Catholic Church or whatever it may be, or the smallest religion. So all he needed to do was file. He succeeded in his filing, and then he was back on the road right away, not needing to obey the laws and regulations that apply to secular child cares. And think that your tax money, I said Alabama, but your federal tax dollars, because of the low-income subsidy, money comes from your pocket and your pocket to go to these religious child cares that don't even need to obey the most basic health and safety laws. That happened in the 21st century in the United States of America. We should be aware of all of these facts. We should be aware of facts ancient and modern. You know, there are those in the Inca tradition. Several hundred years ago, in pre-Columbian times, they had a religious tradition that they would take children up to the top of a mountain and they would kill them as a sacrifice to their god. That was part of their religious tradition. But that was hundreds of years ago. I want to describe to you another story from the 21st century in the United States of America. There was a girl named Jessica Crank. Jessica Crank was 15 years old, and Jessica had a tumor growing on her shoulder. Now, it was a perfectly treatable tumor with modern medical science, except that Jessica's mother did not believe in modern medical science. She believed in the Epistle of James, and she had learned from her minister that there is a law in the state of Tennessee that gives greater leeway to so-called faith healing homes, an Orwellian misnomer. And as a result of this, the tumor on Jessica's shoulder grew and grew and grew until it was literally, not figuratively, literally the size of a basketball on this girl's shoulder. She suffered horrible, agonizing, torturous pain for weeks on end, and then she died. That happened in the 21st century in the United States of America. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, Alabama, Tennessee, you don't need to worry about that. 38 states have statutes which give greater leeway to so-called faith healing. I bet you there are people in this room who protested against the torture at Abu Ghraib. And if you did, I commend you for protesting against torture. It's wrong. But nothing that anyone experienced at Abu Ghraib was as horrific as what was experienced by Jessica Crank. Where are the protests for this girl? Where are the protests for those whose human rights are violated by these kinds of laws? We need to stand up. We need to do something about it. And for me, the values that I have grown to believe in and share, I would call these values, perhaps these enlightened values, Oregon values, the Oregon values of a gentleman you may be familiar with, Linus Pauling, who's the only person to win 2 solo Nobel Prizes in 2 different areas, and said, do unto others 20% better than you would have them do unto you to correct for subjective error. Now that to me is a set of values that I can embrace.